So I'm going to talk about social media and our teens, and a lot of this is based on research that either one of my mentors, Megan Moreno, has done or I've done. But please interrupt me, ask questions, and it's really data heavy in a way, not to scare you, but just to let you know what's out there and how our teens are using media. So since this is a pretty short talk, but if you want the slides or want more, please let me know. The main thing to know about social media, like how many of us have at least 2 social media profiles? Anybody with more than 3? Right. A lot of us have like an online, sometimes we'll have an online persona, like our more professional one, and then we might have something that's more for family members to be able to see the pictures of their grandkids, like my Facebook page, right? So for teens, they're often using social media to connect, and that's how they're actually communicating with their peers. And so what we know is that really social media is this dynamic process where they're getting information and they're giving information. It's popular, right? Most adolescents have some presence online. And we know that most teens actually have access to some kind of device that can get on the internet. And I'll show you numbers in a minute. So this is old now because when we're collecting data, it always takes us a couple years to collect all the data and then post it. So what we know is that for teens, about 73% have a social media presence, right? Or have a device that can get on to a social media page. This now is kind of flipped, so Snapchat and Instagram are definitely up at the top, and Facebook's more like my generation, or all of us, right? And then, of course, there are new things, Kik and all these other, there's a Sahara and some other different platforms that are being used now. And I don't even try to keep up anymore because it's always changing. I just ask the teen in front of me, what are you using? What's the popular, what's everybody connecting with right now? And then it's pervasive, right? So if over 90% of homes have access to internet via either high-speed internet or LGE connection with a device, teens have access to online accounts pretty much 24/7, and so do adults. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room and the parents are the ones I'm saying, can you put your device away, right? So it's also, even if you don't have access, there's still requirements. Like now all the schools are asking for people to do their homework online, or you're connecting online, or you have to look up your grades, or the parents have to look up their grades. So we can't get away from it. It's not going away, right? There are some differences in terms of both socioeconomic status and racial and ethnic differences too. So if you make more money, you're more likely to have more devices. But if you're an underrepresented minority teen, you're more likely to have like a smartphone that you're using to access the internet versus like a sit-down computer or laptop. So this just says what teens are using. And again, the desktop laptop is really, I think about the schools, because my kindergartner has technology class, which I think is ridiculous, but she does, where they go in once a week to learn how to use a computer. When we go to the public library, that's the first thing she wants to do is sit at the computer and play ABC mouse games. And then many kids have gaming consoles, over 80%. And then 73% with smartphones in the US. And these are numbers from 2015, so that's just gone up from there. And if you haven't looked at the Pew Research Foundation, they have amazing information on technology, social media, and it's public access, easy to look at. The graphs are really interactive as well. And then, of course, social media is both personal and public. I actually had a patient just this week. Her mom pulled me aside and said, she wrote a blog. I read it, and she was disclosing this like she had read her daughter's diary. And so then, of course, I went and read it. I felt a little bad, but the individual put a tremendous amount of personal information on there, not her home address and everything, but just poured her heart out on this blog, which is public access. It was amazingly written. I see cringes, but it's scary how our teens are really putting themselves out there for the whole world to see, for good and bad. So what's put online doesn't go away, even though Snapchat images don't really go away. So a lot of what I feel like I'm asking parents to do is have conversations with your teens that what's on the internet is out there. Even if you take the post down or delete it, it doesn't mean it's completely gone. I can easily take a screenshot of something that, we see that all the time. You know, somebody posts something on Twitter and somebody takes a screenshot and then posts it on social media even after the person took the Twitter post down. All right, so for teens really, like what does all this mean? It means it's influencing their development, right? So we were all adolescents at one point, and really that time is critical for figuring out who we are gonna be as a person, right? And so there are lots of different things that impact that, from having loving parents, supportive relationships, to bullying, harassment, substance use, which we'll hear more about today, and mental health, eating disorders, which we're not going to talk about today, but definitely can in the future, and then relationships too. And all of those things are impacted by social media and presence online. And so what I'll go through next is really some research studies that look at each of these different areas and what kids are saying and how they're using the internet. So the other note is really to just think about the amount of time kids are spending online, right? Other than school, the online forum is the second most frequented public place, right? So if you think about that, that's totally a shift from when I was a teen, where we were all hanging out at a rec center like this after school or before school, and now kids are in their room on, their device, on whatever their social media account is. And so if we just try to brush it under the rug or ignore it, we're not really doing our kids a service. Really, we should have a presence online too, or at least know what they're looking at. All right, so who knows what cyberbullying is or has heard about cyberbullying, right? So it goes by lots of different terms. Online harassment is another way of saying cyberbullying, but I'll give you an example. So if I post a picture of me being made up and going to an event, and people post like, oh my gosh, you're ugly, your makeup looks terrible, that kind of thing, that counts as cyberbullying. And for teens, almost half have experienced it, right? Experienced some kind of negative comments or negative posts that continue to follow them. And a quarter actually admit to actually being the perpetrators, to actually posting something negative about somebody else online. This is self-report, so it could be higher than that for the people who actually post negative comments. And what we know is that for teens who are bullied online, they have higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression, higher rates of suicidal thoughts, lower self-esteem, and the kids are going to extremes to try to get away from it. I have a number of patients who have moved schools, their parents have thought about relocating to different cities, but even when they move, that online harassment doesn't necessarily stop, right? Because it's their online persona. So I have another slide that talks about the differences, right? So I think for most of us growing up, when we think about bullying, right, we get away from it when we get home. Like we might have somebody who's teasing us at school, but as soon as we're home or in our place of worship or the rec center, our safe environment, it's gone. But because kids are spending so much time online, the cyberbullying, this is hard to see, but it can happen 24/7. And it can be any location. You can be on vacation, you can be at your doctor's office, and still be getting those negative comments. Rapid dissemination of it too. So if I post something negative about a picture, everybody who is viewing my profile can see that. So it's not just between me and whoever was in the lunchroom anymore. And it's also harder to give feedback to the person who's instigating it, right? If I'm in the school and somebody shoves somebody, it's not that it's easy for the bystanders, but there's a lot higher chance that somebody's going to be like, knock it off, that's not cool, right? Versus online, you might read it and think, oh, well, okay, and don't necessarily understand the impact that it might be playing on your peer. And it's also harder to know who posted what, right? If I've got an anonymous name, or, I'm not necessarily putting myself out there as Yolanda Evans when I have my online presence. So it's really hard to know who might need to have some consequence. And it's hard for the social media platforms too to stay on top of it, even though most of them have rules around reporting or taking down content. And then for teens, of course, because they're not just seeing the peers online, they're seeing them in person too. There's this fear of what others are thinking when they go to see them in person, or the anxiety about how people are going to act around them because of whatever was posted. All right, so we're going to move on to relationships, and this is just 1 or 2 slides. But basically, so this is Dr. Moreno's work, and she's in Wisconsin now, but she looks at social media profiles and looks at what people are posting on their profile picture. And for the kid, this was for Facebook, and for the kids who referenced sexual displays on Facebook, they were more likely to report an intent to engage in the behavior. But the other thing was that kids who were posting also perceived that their friends perceived that they were more sexually active than they actually were. So, thinking about the peers and the influence of peers, if I'm posting provocative pictures or things like that, then my friends are more likely to believe that I am engaging in behaviors whether or not I actually am, which then the question is that making this a social norm or not? How is that going to impact what my friends around me are doing? If they perceive that I'm engaging in a behavior, does that make it okay so that I'm more likely to engage? I mean, I don't know in terms of this. But the other scary thing was the relationship between depression displays and sexual behavior. So those kids who were more depressed or had more displays of depression on their media sites were also more likely to be getting online solicitation or being approached by strangers or people who didn't know them, which is also really scary. So I think all of this to say, I'll go into it a little bit about some things we can do, but it just says like, okay, if people are posting content, or if you see something on your kid's page, like speak up about it. Don't just don't feel like you can feel like you're violating privacy a little bit, but they put it out there publicly, right? So with substance abuse, very similarly, if people posted a profile pic where they were drinking or partying or something like that, they were more likely to report binge drinking. And the other thing on Twitter, this was a newer study, but for people that were posting a lot of comments around substance use, most of them in the younger people were positive comments as well, not dangers or the negative consequences. So I think for me that says, okay, wow, as an adult, I want to have more of a presence online to post some of the negative things and the consequences. And again, does this normalize the behavior and make it okay to do? Same thing with the eating disorder. We call it pro-ED or pro-ANA or pro-MIA in our medical clinics. But many of the patients that we treat for anorexia, bulimia, are going online to learn how to be a better anorexic or such. It gets harder when you get into high school, really. And middle school is kind of that kind of gray zone where it comes back to your family values and what you decide on as a family. For whoever is helping raise the kids, just making sure that you're in agreement and that whatever rules, regulations you have around it, that you're in agreement with those. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has media guidelines, which I didn't put in here, but they just revamped them because social media and internet access is so pervasive. We used to say, okay, no more than 2 hours of screen time, that's it. But that's near impossible, especially when kids all of their homework's online, like they're connecting with peers to do group work online. They're trying to talk to their coach about the plays or whatever online, and so you just can't get away from it. So now it's try to keep it to a minimum and have some media-free zones. So like the dinner table, that's a media-free zone, right? No phones, no tablets, like that kind of thing. The bed, that's a media-free zone. So your bed should be only for sleeping, not doing your homework, not surfing the net, which we know is like how many people can say that that's true for them, right? Yeah. So and then they also changed it because they used to say, okay, no screens at all under age 2, and now it's okay if you're like FaceTiming with grandma. Like they literally said that as an example in the guidelines. So we had to adapt and change things a little bit. But in general, the recommendations are to know your kid's password and username, so you can do spot checks, basically. Not that you have to look at it every day, but random spot checks. And then have the rules around, like, here's where we're not going to be using it. And no screens an hour before going to bed at a bare minimum. Because this LED screen really does change how our brain works. So we have circadian rhythms, melatonin that are pineal gland releases, and if we're sitting on a screen all night long, that is throwing off our brain from making the hormones and chemicals that make us want to go to sleep. And so that's part of why we see teens with such disrupted sleep patterns, and adults too, right, with disrupted sleep patterns. So I think it's hard though, because it's really challenging to try to implement these. So kind of like we really need to be implementing these things when kids are really little, so they're used to it. By the time they're 17, it's kind of almost too late to say, okay, now we're not going to have screens at all at certain times, right? But we can try to like work with them to compromise a little bit. All right, so instead of charging our phones right by our pillow, we're going to have your phone charging on the kitchen counter from now on, or we're going to set the do not disturb on your phone from 10 o'clock to 10 o'clock, or something like that. Yeah. We actually, Dr. Moreno again did a study asking teens, like, okay, if you post something, do you want somebody to say anything to you, and what do you want them to say? So the short answer is people do want, these teens, they were 18 to 19-year-old university students, 93% wanted an adult to approach them about the content that they displayed. So maybe they posted like, I feel really sad today, or I should just end everything, or something like that. And they preferred in-person communication to like an online response, which I find like really reassuring, that if I'm putting something out there, I'm okay with an adult in my life talking to me about it. And then the next question, of course, is what do you say? And this was kind of a follow-up to that study, and they basically had kids who had posted something related to depression specifically, and the green ones were the ones that the participants were okay with. So don't say, I saw your post and clearly you're depressed, right? Don't say that so much, but like, I saw your post, I just wanted to check in with you. Is everything okay? That's okay. And then don't say, you shouldn't be posting that. It's totally embarrassing, like something shaming, but it is okay to say, well, this is from my perspective. Your mom mentioned that you've been posting some pretty dark stuff. Can I talk to you about it? Is there anything that we can do to help? So I think for me as a parent, this is a relief that it's okay for me to say something, and as a pediatrician, right? It's okay for me to say like, whoa, I saw this. Can we talk about it? Right, so that's really the main message, is let them know you're worried if you are, and I try, with all conversations with teens, try not to do it when emotions are at like the peak, right? If you see, yeah, okay, great. So we're gonna talk about the escalation, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. So I won't go into that in too much detail, but in general, try to remain non-judgmental if you can. Really be honest, let them know you're worried and why, and try not to be really, I mean, you're gonna be emotional, right, as a parent or a loved one if you see something like that online, but try to let them know you're worried, but not be bawling and crying your eyes out when you're talking to them if you can. The Common Sense Media is one of the websites that I recommend to anybody taking care of teens, children, little ones. And they actually go in, they have really quick little segments, almost like YouTube segments, where they pop up recommendations for how to deal with some things. So like, how do you deal with cyberbullying? What's this new Sarah app that kids are using, and what are the pros and cons of it? And they have 5 media tips, which are really kind of no-brainers for all of us, but for a child or a teen, it might not be obvious. So the number one is use privacy settings, right? So when you have an online presence, make sure you set it so that only your friends can see your profile or that kind of thing. Think before you post. We've all kind of talked about that already. Turn off your location, because all of these devices, right, have your location on. Like when I got here, it said, your car is parked at the Federal Way Community Center, right? So turn that off. And then never post mean messages. That goes to the comment over here, or nude photos. And then don't spend all day online. Like, so those are kind of some general ones. But they have, it's a great website. They also have things around like movies and different shows and like what the content is in them before. So if your teen's like, I really want to go see this with my friends or try this video game, they kind of go through those things and put up there for parents, like just what is in them, so you can kind of know ahead of time or know after the fact what they might have seen. And then, of course, to end on a positive, there are some benefits, right? We all know them, but going online, it's really freeing in a way. You can be anonymous, you can put yourself out there, you can be whoever you want to be. It gives a sense of community. Let's say I have some rare genetic disorder and nobody else in my state has it, but I can connect with other people who have gone through an experience or ask questions, that kind of thing. And then it really gives you can have a sense of self-esteem boost too. I've met a number of kids who have YouTube profiles for their makeup or things like that, and they get so many positive comments, and they're really getting a lot from the social media. So it's not all bad, right? You have information at your fingertips too. So I think for most of us, and we try to be savvy users, right? If you're looking up information, look for the author credentials. You notice, like at all of my slides, I posted like who wrote what, and the article was cited on there. Look for those references when you're reading about different things online, and then make sure the information is coming from a reputable source. So, like, is it coming from the Centers for Disease Control, or is it coming from so-and-so at so-and-so website, and they have no credentials after their name, right? And then, like I said, avoid posting your personal contact information. And then I like my grandma test because my grandma's awesome. And she's been through, a lot of life.